So, on Friday morning, the world woke up to a mini tech apocalypse.
A chaos across a number of industries worldwide, including airlines, banking, and healthcare, after a global IT outage hits key services.
Big breaking news where we're learning that thousands of Windows users across the globe are witnessing the blue screen of death era.
The majority of the systems at this point are stuck in an endless loop of restarting, going into recovery mode, and crashing and restarting again.
A massive global technical outage tied to CrowdStrike, which is a major cybersecurity provider, has knocked critical computer infrastructure offline all across the country and, in fact, all around the world.
Air travel, banks, retail, hospitals, a TV channel, parts of the global stock markets. They've all been impacted by this historic outage. So what caused it? Well, on Thursday night, some clients of Microsoft Systems faced an outage on its cloud service system called Azure. On Friday, CrowdStrike, one of the most popular cybersecurity firms in the world whose systems are embedded in thousands of Microsoft applications, told its customers that an update on its Falcon sensor is causing systems to crash. Computer screens across the world went blue, displaying what is known as the blue screen of death. Early on, Microsoft acknowledged the issue and its impact and said it was working to, quote-unquote, restore services for those still experiencing disruptions as quickly as possible. Later, here's what CrowdStrike founder George Kurtz said.
We're resolving and have resolved the issue now. It's recovering systems that are out there. And essentially, as you've talked about in the statement I put out, is the system was sent an update, and that update had a software bug in it and caused an issue with the Microsoft operating system. And we identified this very quickly and remediated the issue. And as systems come back online, as they're rebooted, they're coming up and they're working. And now we are working with each and every customer to make sure that we can bring them back online.
So, in this weekend episode, which we just had to drop outside of our usual schedule, we talked to a global tech veteran and a cybersecurity expert. We try to understand what caused the outage, why the solution is not easy to implement, why it is a quality check, testing, and implementation problem, and whether there are other such outages in the offing. It's Saturday, the 20th of July. From the Economic Times, I'm your host Anirban Chaudhary. This is the Morning Brief. First, I spoke to Lukas Olenik, an independent cybersecurity expert and the author of Philosophy of Cybersecurity.
So it seems that developers and employees of CrowdStrike pushed a bad update.
Bad update, okay.
A bad update, yes. So that cybersecurity products receive updates very often because they, for example, need to update some signatures of new threats. This is, in general, a normal thing that such software is being updated. This is normal. In the current circumstances and in the current case, the update caused the low-level driver not working properly, and this made it impossible to boot, so properly start the operating system. And this is why after an update, when the systems were rebooted, they couldn't start.
So here's an analogy that my techie friend gave me. Let's assume Microsoft manufactures two-wheelers and not computers and wants to provide great safety features for its customers. So it sources a sensor from a company called CrowdStrike, which detects fuel leakage. It adds that sensor to all its new vehicles. If the sensor detects a leak, vehicles do not start. If they're already running, they stop. Now, CrowdStrike updates those sensors to provide better accuracy and in that process corrupts them. So all the vehicles that have the sensor installed in them stop running. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it definitely drove home the point to me. Okay, so what about the solution to this? The manual reboot. That seems to be a problem as well because it's very time consuming and for some it'll be really expensive as well. What would you say to that?
So the ideal recovery would be not to install the flawed update, but let's face it that lots of systems did install them. So if those systems were restarted, they couldn't be brought back to life. So they couldn't start. And since it's in many cases, it's impossible to update such infrastructure. Sometimes it may be possible, but in many cases, it's not possible to automatically update the infrastructure with some management systems. Then it demands human manual intervention. So we are speaking about the necessity to manually make some interventions in thousands or millions of desktop systems. So
Right.
workstation, that's a lot of work, especially at companies which lack the necessary IT staff.
It'll be very difficult to implement these solutions, right? Then.
It will be time consuming. That it all depends on the size of their organization and how many computers are affected, and also the work staff, whether IT staff is sufficient or not. Because if the company, for example, does not have the necessary IT staff, well, it might be more difficult.
Right. But from a cybersecurity point of view, such updates are inevitable, right? If they're not updated, they'll make the system unsafe as well.
But that's not the best framing because the systems now cannot start. So actually they are very safe now. No data can be stolen from them because they cannot start. However, it's also a breach of availability. So it's also a cybersecurity issue. Loss of availability of systems and of data.
So Lucas told me that this is definitely historic. Why? Because other such massive outages have happened because of malware, because of viruses. This is the first time there has been such a large impact of a legit system update. Now, how does it reflect on Microsoft as a company? I asked Peter Bendor Samuel, CEO and founder of tech research firm Everest Group.
Well, clearly this is very embarrassing for Microsoft. It's also hugely impactful for many companies that use the Microsoft. So it's very serious. And I believe that it's serving as a wake-up call for all companies that are using these global platforms.
Right. If you can explain to me a little bit about what you think it says about the lack of proper quality checks, possibly, or even the implementation of upgrades. What do you think are the problems that it exposes?
Well, clearly it exposes that the update process is flawed and there isn't sufficient testing and staging in place. That said, I'm quite familiar with the Microsoft update process and it's quite sophisticated. So I think what this shows is that any global platform is inherently risky. It doesn't matter how hardened we make them, how resilient we make them. There's always the possibility, and in fact, the inevitability that this kind of thing will happen. Now, we can reduce it, but these systems are so large, so complex that we will inevitably have some of these. And when you look at the black hats and the sovereign nations that are looking to disrupt these platforms, I think that risk rises even higher. What this disruption shows is that we are very, very vulnerable to by either accidentally creating disruptions in these platforms or a black hat intentionally doing that. We have these large platforms that many companies use in many countries across many industries. And when you have a failure in them, like we had today, it disables big in parts of industries, companies, and countries, and creates a completely different order of risk.
So are we meaning companies and even countries, moving to solutions?
Countries are going to become more concerned about the vulnerabilities for their citizens, companies, and themselves, and they're going to start to put more regulatory oversight over these platforms. Second, I think we're going to see particularly the really important industries start to have more pressure to create isolated, rather than share platforms, create private clouds where they can control this themselves. Consequently, when there's a disruption like this, it won't disable a whole country or a whole industry or a whole.
So a decentralization of sorts.
Exactly. I think we're going to see more pressure building on the private cloud and a more decentralized approach where we segment these out, and these disruptions become less impactful because they're limited in scope.
Right. Do you think, and this is a thought that I got from somebody else that I was talking to, do you think there is a culture of trial and rollbacks seeping into all sorts of tech innovation without thinking of the wider consequences they may have?
Well, I mean, there's inherent tension on the need to move fast. So tech and big tech have been adapting this agile, constant innovation motion. And that brings a lot of benefits. We quickly evolve functionality and we improve continuously. That runs into this constraint, which is sometimes our improvements are a step backwards. We make mistakes. And so this continuous update philosophy has to be mitigated by really robust testing. So yes, that is an issue, but in slowing down innovation, we as consumers and companies pay a price for that. We don't get as fast continuous improvement as we would otherwise get. So yes, there is tension between robust testing and continuous and fast improvement of functionality.
Right. Just to be on a tangent, and I'm not even sure this is a tangent, but as AI permeates more and more into digital innovations and the way tech behaves or is implemented or just exists in the world, and which is basically a system which can think for itself more and more. Do you think all that we have discussed, the robust tests, etc., do you think it is more in danger, or do you think it's safer as we take that route?
So I think the advent of AI just increases the tech investment. In theory, AI should be able to help us with some of this, better design, but just the quantity of technology, I suspect, will overwhelm the improvements in our ability to manage that technology. So I think the fundamental trajectory is we're going to have to spend, as a world and as a tech companies, far more investment in making resilient technology. And the more you share technology, the more we are, as firms, industries, and the world, vulnerable to a single point of failure.
In the short term, do you see more outages happening?
I believe we will see more outages. I don't know that the increase in velocity will be. I believe that over time, Microsoft and other scaled tech players will invest more in resilience. But I think there are more outages inevitable. These tend to come around every year to 18 months. I suspect that the same pattern will stay there. I think what could change that is, as I said before, the intervention of sovereign nations in terms of trying to disrupt each other's economies. And I believe that's a very viable threat and likely to manifest itself, in which case we're going to see more of these outages.
Friday's blue screen crisis exposes the vulnerability of our tech systems. They are as fragile as they are influential, and the interdependence of one platform to another makes for even more alarming consequences when a glitch occurs. It's scary to think how one line of incorrect coding could have stopped flights, caused banking and stock trading disruptions across the world, and forced a global news channel to almost go off air. So, as innovations and upgrades become more and more frequent and complex, it all boils down to a few choices. Investing in resilience or just features? Super fast updates or robust testing and quality checks? Centralized innovation and impact or distributing both to smaller units? The answer to these questions will decide how vulnerable or strong the world of technology turns out to be in the years to come. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by Sarohini Jain and sound designed by Amrit Reggie. Nothing excites us more than chasing the latest news and breaking them down for you in sharp, insightful audio analysis. So keep listening to us on a platform of your choice. This is your host Anirban Chaudhary signing off. Have a good weekend. All clips used in this episode belong to their owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.